Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Play, Pause, Rewind. It is our 93rd episode. We're back once again to talk about movies and TV shows. Niles, what's been going on since our last episode?
Oh, whole lot of emotional toiling. Yeah, it's been a frustrating week. A little bit of a sad week for us here. Just we lost our pet just a few days ago, and so that's why this episode is a little late, just because of that.
Yep.
Yeah, very emotional about that. He was such a good little cat of ours, Kevin. You might have heard him sometimes in this podcast, guest starring in the background, but yeah, he's no longer with us, and we miss him. But consider this your PSA for the week to do two things. One, love your pet and pet them and give them extra scritches and extra treats, and just love them unconditionally. And two, maybe look into pet insurance if you can.
Oh.
But I've been okay otherwise. How are you doing?
Well, first off, sorry for y'all's loss. Obviously, that's awful. I did feel kind of weird asking you how your week was, knowing exactly what happened. But it's like, fuck, that's the format of the show. But
we gotta let people know.
Yeah, I know. I was like, how have you been doing? I know it's not good, but I have to ask. Yeah, that's terrible news. Obviously, Kevin was so cute, and he had his little cameos on the show throughout. I'd always see him like walking around. It's wonderful. But as for how I'm doing, I'm okay. Had a pretty busy week last week with work. Had a tennis clinic today. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, good.
But yeah, it's been nice that the weather isn't super fucking hot.
Yeah, right. Yeah, here in Colorado, yeah, it's been blistering for a while, and now these past 2 weeks we've gotten some nice cool weather, which is always wonderful, and it helped put out some fires across the state, which is fantastic.
Yeah, we needed that. But we are here once again to talk about, this time, a TV show. Those of you who listen to our show may remember that we are talking about The Acolyte this week. It's the latest television series in the Star Wars franchise, obviously. The Acolyte takes place 100 years before the events of the prequel trilogy and follows a team of Jedi as they investigate the murder of a renowned Jedi Master and begin to uncover a shadowy threat created by showrunner Leslie Headland and starring Lee Jung-jae, Amanda Stenberg, Manny Jacinto, Charlie Barnett, Daphne Keane, and Carrie-Anne Moss. The Acolyte. Niles, what are your non-spoilery initial thoughts on The Acolyte?
You know, I'm mostly positive on this series overall. It's not perfect by any means, and I feel like the more time that passes, the less I will like it over time.
Okay.
But I appreciated how this series felt refreshing and unique in its own way. It felt original. It wasn't trying to just build upon what's already been established in Star Wars. It wasn't just stuck in the original trilogy era or anything like that. It felt new, something like didn't rely on any previously established lore or characters. It's kind of its own thing, completely different time period of the Star Wars universe. All new characters, plenty of room to grow. So I really liked that, and I also enjoyed how the series took some big risks, particularly to focus on the failures of the Jedi without getting too much into spoilers here. But it felt like a very original angle, and it added more context to the mythos of the universe. It just kind of rounding them out, adding some complexity to the Jedi Order and this world that we know as Star Wars. And it introduced some very interesting concepts too. It explored some very out there kind of ideas, and kind of going a little back to Andor in a certain way of looking at more of the logistical details of like governance and how the Jedi Order is playing in with the Senate, which I thought was pretty neat. But I think that the execution overall, little sloppy, little unpolished, could have been a lot better. I've got some other thoughts, but what about you, Dylan? What are some of your initial thoughts here?
Yeah, so I overall had a pretty decent time with this. Like you said, it has some problems, specifically the pacing. The pacing is fucking awful.
Yes.
It's like It's genuinely terrible. And I think, I don't know what it is. Maybe Disney mandates certain episode counts and certain run times within those episodes, but this was like 8 half-hour episodes. And it either should have been a movie or should have been a 16-episode series. I feel like this weird middle ground just doesn't work. And it's like, that may be contradictory to say like a movie or a longer series, but I actually think this story could have worked as either. But in this weird middle ground, it flounders. And we'll talk about that more in spoilers, because there are very specific points where the pacing really shits the bed for me. But overall, I enjoyed the new era. I liked a lot of the characters. I think the themes are interesting, and the show is really engaging with a lot of the stuff that George introduces in the prequel trilogy about the Jedi, the Republic, the relationship between the two, and sort of like this growing rot within these institutions, and that's really awesome. This is kind of the first time the franchise has engaged with those themes since 2005. So it's nice to see that really being touched on. I also thought there were some really fun action scenes, and I really enjoyed the plays on Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon that come out in several of the fights. And overall, I'd say I had some frustrations with the show, but ultimately it's a solidly fun time, and I appreciate seeing something fresh come out of Star Wars for the first time in a little while. Like, I have... Y'all know how I like the earliest, I'd say, Disney Star Wars movies, and I love Andor, I love the animated stuff, but I think the franchise overall, especially in the TV realm, since Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau sort of took the driver's seat, has become a franchise that plays in a smaller and smaller sandbox, so it was nice that this story established itself in a place outside of that sandbox. And I also think the whole ordeal was worth it just for the introductions of Master Soul and the Stranger. Both really engaging characters who we'll talk more about in spoilers. But do you have any more spoiler-free thoughts before we jump in to spoilers?
Yeah, I agree with you that the pacing is erratic and it's too slow. The mystery feels like it's stretched out, and I think you're onto something there of Disney mandating, we need this amount of episodes, we need to fill this amount of time, and I totally agree that this could have been like a 2.5 hour movie, and it still could have been, like, the quality could have been so much better, I think. If you just like trim the fat off, shorten it up, you got a pretty decent show there. And I agree. I think that the Stranger and Soul, they're the most interesting parts of this show, which is kind of a downside because I think that it's an upside and it's a downside because we have our main characters, Osha and May, and in my opinion, they were very underwhelming in terms of performance and writing, but we'll get to that later. I think that those characters could have been more interesting, but this is kind of like a theme. I feel like when we talked about Ahsoka, it was kind of a similar thing of like, Ahsoka's fine, but the real interesting characters are Balin and like his apprentice and these other side characters like that aren't really the center of the show, but they just pull your interest. And it's like we have that same kind of thing here where we're supposed to be caring about these two protagonists, but instead we're focused on the Jedi Master Soul and the Stranger.
Yeah, I will say I think I do prefer Osha as a protagonist to TV show Ahsoka. Sure. I did not find her engaging as a protagonist in that series. I love her in the cartoons. But we'll talk more about Osha in spoilers because I think most of her storyline is a spoiler. But yeah, I think it's like you said though, the show, if you trimmed some of the fat, could have been much sharper and more engaging. But on the flip side, there are elements within this show that are introduced, barely touched upon, but are very interesting and could have been expanded into storylines of their own, which is why I think it could have been a longer series as well. But, I don't want to get too much into that just yet.
Well, and
spoilers and
I'll
stuff.
say too that there's a lot of things in the show that I do like the set design, the costume design, and I like how so much of the show, it feels like it was shot on site in these very real locations. It didn't feel like we were restricted to the volume, and it was just this created environment with CGI or whatever that doesn't look entirely realistic. It felt like this is actually happening in a real place, in a real location, and I appreciated that and the vibrancy that brought to the show. And yeah, I just like how this show also just took some risks and said, we'll see where it lands, but we're also just going back to this era of Star Wars that's like prequel-esque, and lots of people love the prequels. We've got our own opinions on the prequels.
Did a whole video on them.
Yeah, we did a whole video on all the prequels. So if you're curious about our opinions, check that out. But it is kind of cool to go back to this era that's adjacent to that.
Yeah. I would agree, of the Star Wars live-action TV shows, this is the best shot and best looking outside of Andor. Andor is like leagues above all of it, but like compare this to The Mandalorian, except for season 1, Ahsoka, Boba Fett, like this is leagues better than all of those. All of those shows look pretty ass now, and this doesn't. This actually looks pretty good. So
Agreed.
that's nice. You want to hop into spoilers?
Yeah, let's talk about some spoilers for the Acolyte.
All right. Yeah.
First
so
off, do you want to talk about the High Republic?
Yeah. So how familiar are you with the High Republic as an era, like before this show?
So I don't have a huge understanding of it, but I'm not as familiar with it as you probably are. The only thing that I really know about this time period is the Jedi are kind of at the height of their powers, and that Dark Force wielders, the Sith, they're essentially extinct. Yeah.
Yeah, so the era was introduced initially as a publishing initiative across all of the like Lucasfilm's publishing groups, and it was like a literary universe where across that like followed a story across adult novels, young reader novels, and comic books. I am unwilling to engage with it on that level. I'm not going to read all the YA and like baby books that they had, which some fans seem to want to do. But I will say my relationship with the High Republic franchise, I've read the first mainline trilogy of books and the mainline comic books. The comic books are pretty cool. The novels are incredibly frustrating to me. They are all structurally identical. The Jedi fuck around, waiting for something to happen. At the midpoint of the book, the bad guys, these like cool, interesting pirate people, attack. And then the second half of the book is the Jedi responding to the attack. That happens 3 times, and at the end of each book, it's like, oh, the adventure is beginning now. We're gonna start. We're gonna go, and they're gonna go do all these cool things, and they never do. The next book starts, and they're waiting around again. Hopefully, that is not the case after this book. I have not gone further than that. But yeah, you were right. It is the Jedi and the Republic at the height of their power. Also supposed to be when they are at their best. The books I've read take place 250 years before the prequels, so 150 years before this. Obviously, the Jedi have lost some influence and integrity by the time this show starts, because they're in their cover-up period now, where they'll do some fucked up, morally questionable things, and they will just kind of sweep it under the rug. So part of me is sad that we didn't get a story set in that golden age of the Jedi, because that was like the sales pitch for this era, right? But also, when reading those books, I find their portrayal almost ringing false. Like, it feels wrong, because it's like they're so good and so pure that it doesn't feel genuine. Like, you know, in those like YA dystopia books, right, where it's like the society of the story appears to be a utopia, right? You know, everything's so perfect and society is so great. It's like, it always felt like we were in the part of those stories before the big reveal that it's actually a dystopia. You know what I mean? but the reveal never comes. So given that, I'm actually okay with the direction they took this.
Yeah, I get that because like on the surface, everything can appear so normal, and then that's not necessarily true. And yeah, I'm kind of on a similar wavelength with you because I'm glad that we got to explore this era of the High Republic, especially since the OG trilogy era, where so many recent shows have just been pumped out between Obi-Wan and Boba Fett and The Mandalorian and Andor. Like, they're so... It feels like a barren mine at this point.
Are you excited for The Mandalorian and Grogu, a feature film?
Yeah, maybe. We'll see about that. But I mean,
they showed a trailer at D23, and Zeb from the show Rebels is in it. Oh. And he has a ship like the Mandalorian had in the first season. Isn't that exciting?
Like Zeb. I do like Zeb, but I don't know.
This is what I mean about the smaller and smaller sandbox. It's like, oh, good. We're
going back to the sandbox.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the Force Awakens in our sequel trilogy rewind next year. A movie I like quite a lot. I do think, though, destroying the New Republic entirely, as in literally blowing up every planet it was on, was that's like, I think that movie's biggest fuck up because
big time.
Because they're investing, like, every TV show is about the New Republic building itself up, and it's like, guys, it's gone in like 10 years. We can move on as an audience. We don't need to see all the logistics of this fucking government because we know what happens to it. Like, it never gets a chance. It gets blown up and everybody involved dies.
They're like, we're going to do so well here. What is that giant laser in the sky? Oh, no.
Yeah. It's like, we'll talk about it in the sequel rewind next year. I like The Force Awakens. It's a good movie. Yes. But that one thing, it's like, you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, that was the biggest mistake there. They just needed to, like, level the playing field for
they wanted the Rebels Empire dynamic back for the sequels, is why they did it.
Exactly. And, I mean, I'll see if I'll still watch the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, but, I mean, I'm not excited about it by any means. It's like, at this point, I'm just like, they've had their screen time. At a certain point, you got to know when to just say, let's just move on to something else. But prove me wrong, Mr. Filoni. And at this point, to me, getting back to the Acolyte, it feels like all the good ideas from that OG trilogy era, Rebellion versus the Empire kind of deal, it's been just mined to shit. Like, all the ideas have been explored 10 times over at this point, and it feels like it's just nice to go somewhere entirely new with new characters, new situational parameters. We're not relying on, hey, there's this plot point that happens at this point, and here's another plot point. We need to find a way to thread a narrative between point A and point B that's still canonical, but doesn't change anything, like the Obi-Wan show. You know, it's like we don't have those constraints as much here,
right?
And so we can explore a little bit more, and that's what I liked a lot about this High Republic era.
You know what it's like? You saying that reminded me of this. It's like how those people who love AI, quote unquote, art will take a famous painting and say, like, I used AI to expand Starry Night to be like much bigger and show more things, and that's what Filoni and Favreau are doing with the original time period, the original trilogy time period. It's like the painting was made by Van Gogh and framed in a specific way. That was an artistic choice. The story of the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy were framed in the way they were. That was an artistic choice, and now it's like, with encouragement from a lot of the fans and fandom type creators, Disney, Lucasfilm is expanding the frame in ways that they don't need to. Like, did we need to see what Obi-Wan Kenobi was doing between the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy? No, we did not. Because the intention was he was watching over Luke. That was what he was doing. That was his job. But Ewan McGregor is popular as Obi-Wan, so we got to bring him back. And
there's money.
There's money. We'll see you in Spaceballs 2, The Quest for More Money.
But you're so right, though, because, yeah, that's a really good way to think of it, is just like, it doesn't matter if you can add more stars to the sky of Starry Night, or you can make the painting bigger and show more of, Amsterdam or wherever it was that he painted it. It was like,
Yeah.
he just painted it, and it's a great work of art because it's that. He made it, and it's beautiful, and it's there. You don't need to add more context around it because he also made other paintings and other things that you can explore and look at and stuff. You don't need to just keep focusing on this one area and keep exploring it,
Yeah. Like where the painting ends is part of the painting. That's a deliberate choice. And it's I think I've said this on this show before about like stories is characters lived before the story started and after the story ended. We are experiencing a story, and the story is like us looking through a window at a specific point in a character's life. And we have the beginning, middle, and end as they pass through that window. You're not necessarily meant to come back after the window because, like, they existed. They did more things. We know this, but we don't need to explore them. But
yeah.
Let's transition a little bit into just talking about just Star Wars to talking about the dumbass backlashes to this show. Because if there's anything I hate more than needlessly expanding on things that don't need to be expanded, it's fans who rage about stupid shit. So the first thing that was majorly controversial was Ki-Adi-Mundi, a character who you may know as the Conehead guy from the Star Wars prequels. He's on the Jedi Council. He's in this. He's just like in the background. And when I was watching it, I was like, oh, it's that guy. I remember him. Maybe it's the same guy from the prequel trilogy. And then I was like, oh, it is him. That's fun. But actually, Niles, this is Star Wars is ruined again. Did you know this?
Not again.
Again, it's been ruined because his age has been changed. How dare they?
No.
Because I was a huge fan of the trading card game and a 1999 CD-ROM that came with the Phantom Menace. Those are my favorite bits of Star Wars media, and they had a date for his birth. And I knew that. I knew that before this show, and I know what that date is, and I'm very mad that they changed it. I'm so angry. Are you angry about this as well?
Wow, yeah, totally. I'm incredibly pissed off that Wikipedia changed his birth year to align with the show.
Yeah.
We're being self-facetious here.
Yes, and just for the record, this is dumb even if his previous age was canon, because it doesn't fucking matter. But it's not canon, actually, because you may recall when Disney purchased Lucasfilm, they wiped the entire expanded universe out of the canon so they could start fresh. So the 1999 CD-ROM that released shortly after The Phantom Menace is now what is called Legends. So it's a different continuity. Shut the fuck up. And these people, like, literally harassed the editors of Wikipedia, like, about this, about changing the date. Yes. Like, I think caused some of them to deactivate accounts online. Like, legitimate, like, death threats, harassment, completely unacceptable behavior. And also, it's like if this is you, if we're talking about you and you were one of the people who did this, you're fucking pathetic. Like,
yeah, like, get a fucking life. Like, it's not that big of a deal if some character's age is changed, especially if he has nothing to fucking do in these movies. You know, he's not a main character. He's just there in the background doing his Jedi thing.
He has one line of note in the entire saga. But what about the droid attack on the Wookiees? That's it. That's the only thing anybody knows him for.
Exactly. Yeah, he doesn't. And just having a cone-shaped head. That's it. And then his stupid death scene in Order 66 on that ice planet, basically. It's like,
oh yeah, he looked so betrayed.
He didn't do anything in the series. So like if they changed Luke Skywalker's birth year, fuck yeah, that is something to get upset about. Absolutely.
Yes,
because
that's a major shift. Yeah.
Yes, that one is understandable. But this is Coyote Moody. This is so stupid to be upset about, and to even have that visceral of a reaction to be like, I'm gonna harass the editors of this website about them changing this one detail. It's like, come on, man, come on.
Yeah, and it's like, forgive us, but you, dear listener or viewer, you did not know, nor did you care, what Coyote Mundi's age was. You just didn't. And I know you didn't, because nobody cares. It's not important at all.
Exactly.
And also, this is another. This goes back to just caring about changes, but not others. It's like Dave Filoni in some interviews on record saying, like, during the Clone Wars, he wanted to do a storyline about some Jedi. I don't remember what one. It doesn't really matter. But the Jedi is one of the guys who's killed in the Geonosis Arena in Episode 2. And apparently he just went to George and he's like, hey, I want to use this character for a storyline. Is it okay if he's just, like, actually alive? And George's like, yeah, whatever. Like...
yeah, whatever. I don't care. It's not my thing anymore.
It's like, well, I mean, at that point, it was his thing. He still owned it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's right.
But it's like, canon is always less important than a good story. Always. And there are different levels of canon, too. Like, if it's in the movies, I think it's pretty much treated seriously, right? If it's in the live action or cartoon TV shows, that's like the next level of canon. And that is, all the stuff that happens in those shows is canonical fact until it's contradicted by a movie. And that's how it goes. There are different tiers of canon. And the CD-ROM, is probably the lowest tier.
A video game released...
not even a video game. It's like a lore CD. Like, it's not a game, as far as I understand.
Okay. That's even stupider. But yeah, you're totally right. Yeah, there's different levels to canon. And it's such a silly thing to get upset over, too, especially since we know nothing about his species, like, colloquially, as, like, just general fans. Like, I'm not going to go look up everything about his conehead species. I don't give a shit that much. But, like, you know, Star Wars has gone to such great lengths to introduce so many different species into this universe that are unique. It's diverse. They all speak different languages. They all live different timelines. Like Yoda's fucking species, they live for millennia, you know, so long, or however long it is. So it's like, why are you going to get upset about this one species and them retconning how long when he was born? It's such a silly thing to get upset about. And I also think that this backlash, it kind of shows how some of these anti-Disney Star Wars fans who don't like, who are upset about Disney owning Star Wars and producing this content and think that they're just ruining the franchise. And they'll they're just looking for any kind of tiny little slip up, tiny little detail to get angry over and point to as an example that Disney is ruining the franchise. And it's like, come on, guys. Like, you don't need to just do that.
Yeah. And like you have a note here mentioning, like, as far as the canon goes, people were mad that like he was around when there was a Sith doing things. And
and he does have like a line like
in the Phantom Menace.
Yeah, where he says like or I don't know if it's him or someone else, but someone says like the Sith haven't been in existence for over like a millennia.
Over a millennia. Yeah, it is him. But like, I don't know if you watched the prequels, including the Phantom Menace, he's fucking wrong. There are two Sith like 6 blocks down.
They're all like, so oblivious.
did you, dear Star Wars fan, watch that fucking trilogy? Because the whole thing is about how the Jedi are wrong about a lot of shit and aren't noticing the very obvious patterns happening in front of them, and so they all fucking die. But you're right. And the reason that they're like this, it's like, and there are plenty of valid criticisms of Disney as a corporation more broadly, but also Disney Star Wars. We just made some earlier in this episode, right? Like, we're not universally fans of everything they've made in the franchise, but this section of the fan base, and it's like the fucking Star Wars theory guy is one of the main ones. He sucks, but you're right. They're looking for a slip up because they pick their target ahead of time, the show or movie, and like every time there's either a woman or a person of color in a leading role, that's going to be a target for them. And they work backwards to manufacture an outrage to the point where they will contradict things they've said many, many times in the past in order to make an argument. But they're just smart enough to know they can't come out and say, like, well, this show's about a woman, and that's bad because women are bad. So they think that, though, and so they have to come up with something else. And it's like there's a whole ecosystem of these creators, like that fucking theory guy, the neurotic or whatever, the EFAT people. Like, they all suck, and they're all bad. They're bad at media analysis, and they're bad people. But it's about manufacturing an outrage to muddy up the conversation. And this, like, it kind of started with The Force Awakens. It really picked up steam with The Last Jedi, and it's never stopped since then. It's like every single property. And speaking about women and people of color, the other backlash to this show is everything about the, like, witch coven in the flashback episode. I don't really see the problem here. Like, I know what they are mad at, women, but there's really nothing offensive to Star Wars lore or canon here at all, right?
Yeah, there really isn't, and I'm glad that they included this because you know, first it kind of shows off a different religion, we'll call it. You know, because the Jedi and the Sith, it's really the Jedi, and then just like the corrupted Jedi become the Sith, whatever. But they have
Sith do have their own, like, creed and religion of sorts, right? Like,
that's fair. But you know, those are the only two religions that we've seen about the Force, and this one's introducing another one of just these witches. And we've seen some witches before in Star Wars, especially in the animated stuff. But
the Night
just
Sisters,
having
right?
these other kinds of Force wielders, calling it the Thread, and rather than the Force, they have their kind of own beliefs about it, and they're all connected to it in some way. It's refreshing to see that, and you know, people get upset about, I think, like, the main controversy was just that they were, just a bunch of women kind of living together in this cult, this coven. And then it's just like these two leaders are, you know, lesbian witches who have some kids through the Force. Yeah. And it's like, guys, did you watch The Phantom Menace? Like, that's literally how Anakin came into creation. It was through the Force. Like, it's just people choosing this thing to get upset about, like we were just saying, but then also these people who don't like women, don't like LGBTQ individuals. It's like, I just hate it. I just hate.
Well, it's like, grow the fuck up. If you're upset by those things, if you're upset by people who are different than you, you're a fucking baby. Like, you're just a weak little shit. I have my problem with the Coven is not about the Coven at all. It's to do with the pacing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I thought this stuff was interesting because, like you said, it's building out that, like, the Force is just something that exists in the world of Star Wars, right? And we typically follow the Jedi as our main characters across this franchise. But it turns out it's like, oh, the Jedi are just one group with an interpretation of the Force and how to engage with it. The Sith are a different group with their own perspective, and now you have this Coven, and there are probably more. And a big part of this show, which I actually think is interesting, is the criticism. I think it comes from the mother of the Coven, right, where it's like the Jedi are monopolizing the Force, essentially. Yes. They are the institution in power, and because of that, they feel it's their right to command how everyone else engages with the Force, and that is part of their problem. Also, I really liked this storyline because we get to see, like, I have always thought it's kind of fucked up that the Jedi just, like, take babies and induct them into their, like, organization, but you really get to see how fucked up that is. Yeah, because we're seeing it from the perspective of people who are not the Jedi Knights doing it, and it's like, these fucking guys just show up on your doorstep and are like, well, your kid is Force sensitive, so we're going to take your infant away. Because if Osha and May are too old, everyone is too old. Like, they're taking these children before they have enough cognition to make a decision of their own and inducting them into a cult. You know?
Yeah, they're radicalizing them into a different kind of cult. It's just they're just taking these kids, and it's yeah, yeah. I liked that we got this, and I liked how we had these multiple perspectives. I think that this backlash, it kind of highlights two things for me. The first is just this toxic obsession and fandom within Star Wars, which we've already kind of talked about.
Yeah.
It's just continued to kind of grow since episode 8 when that was released, and then gotten worse and worse, and just these fans harassing people, and it's like, guys, calm down. It is just a piece of fiction. And then 2 is also this lack of patience and attention to detail.
Yeah.
And if these fans really cared about the rules of Star Wars or whatever, they would be on board with this idea of Ocean May being created through the Force, like we've already said. It aligns with Anakin's origin story, and it fits well within the context of these Force wielders and just how the Force can be used, manipulated, and the different powers that it provides you with. But then it also highlights, I think, how fans love to jump on the bandwagon and immediately criticize things they don't understand, like the whole Coyote Mundi thing, or just jumping down on like minute details of the story and getting kind of pissed off about these things of like, why is this happening? It's like, well, let the series continue, and then you might get an answer. The show slowly revealed some details over time, and these fans couldn't wait for those details to emerge, and it's just they were just looking for these things to complain about, like we've already talked about. And it's just frustrating to see that kind of behavior among people who like this franchise, because I like Star Wars, but to a point, I realize it's just a work of fiction.
Yeah. Well, and it's like the thing about the post-prestige TV television shows, which this is one of those, is that it's harder to review individual episodes because it's now just like Disney's formula for TV is like, oh, we're making an 8-hour movie. And there are valid criticisms to make of that. I think there is something that is cool about TV that is lost in this style of show. But it means that, like, if you're trying to, and I understand a lot of creators and reviewers, it's like it's your job to write or make a review video about every episode every week. I get that. But if you're doing that and you recognize that this is a very serialized show, you should make allowances for like, oh, this doesn't really make sense to me right now, but like we have to wait and see. We have to wait and see till the end of the season, because it would basically be like if I sat down to review The Empire Strikes Back and every 25 minutes I pause the movie and I go make a video and I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense. Why is this happening right now? And like, well, the movie's not fucking done, man. Maybe wait until it's over. And that's why we don't do, except for our very first one, our very first episode, we reviewed the first half of WandaVision. Ever since then, though, and that was just because we wanted to talk about it on our first episode and thought it would be like a good launching pad. We were learning, but that's why we only review TV shows once the season is done. So we have the full context. And like even then, maybe certain things are left open for a future season, but you have to draw a line somewhere, and we draw the line at a season. But it's and I don't even like the story concept that Anakin is like a magical Force birth. I think I say that in our prequel rewind. I don't like that. I think it's dumb. But I'm not going to get mad at this show for engaging with an idea that exists within the universe already. Like, it's fine. You know?
It works, and it's fine. And I think he was originally supposed to have this kind of, Jesus parallel in a way.
He was. Yes. And I don't like that, but
yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, he's space Jesus, great, but it's I think giving Osha and May this kind of origin story, it takes that away a little bit, and he's not so much just space Jesus. Like, well, this could happen to anybody. That's true. This doesn't just necessarily imply that he is the chosen one because he was, born from without a father. It's there's some more going on here. He's not the only one, and there's other.
I think that's why they hate this too. I think they feel it takes away the uniqueness of Anakin or whatever. And I guess from my perspective, it's like, I don't like that element of uniqueness for Anakin. I don't like anything about the Chosen One story, so I don't care if it gets diminished a little bit because I think it's a bad storytelling decision.
Yeah. Well, then there's something I also wanted to just, since we're talking so much about the fandom, I think, from my perspective, I feel like that the fandom is really the main problem with the Acolyte. There are some problems with the show, and we'll get to those. And there's some good stuff too, but I just want to keep talking about the fandom for just a tiny bit longer. And I might have brought this up in previous episodes on Star Wars content that we've done before, these talking points, but I think they're important to discuss here, specifically just because of this backlash and just kind of the direction that the entire universe is going right now, the franchise. Because Star Wars, you have to appease multiple generations of fans. It's a kind of unique franchise in that way because you have you have multiple ones. And there's lots of different segments and everything like that. But three clear ones come to mind. OG trilogy fans, prequel trilogy fans, and then the sequel era / Disney era fans. And then you get the Clone Wars era fans in there too.
Kind of in between.
Exactly. There's a lot. It's kind of like little subsects, like people who really just like The Mandalorian, people who really like Rebels, or people who like very specific things from Star Wars. And you have to try and appease all three or all these multiple different generations of fans, these different audiences. And it's kind of this catch-22 impossible task here. Given the budget for each episode of this show, because I know it was a very expensive show overall, I'm giving the creators the benefit of the doubt that they did their best to try and appease all audiences, be truthful to the canon and lore, and explore the universe, broaden it in certain areas, and that they were very intentional in those ways. But it's impossible to appease all these fans and keep everyone happy, placate everyone, because every fan wants something different, and every fan has their own different headcanon. Every fan thinks that their perspective on the franchise is the right one, and they think that they understand Star Wars better than every other Star Wars fan. And,
they don't.
Exactly.
But they think that.
You and I too, Dylan. I think that we have our own unique perspectives on Star Wars, and we have opinions on how it should be. But it doesn't mean that we're right. And it doesn't mean that anyone else is right or that anyone else's opinion is better than anyone else's about Star Wars. And I think that is kind of a problem within this fandom, is that some people are going to like this show a lot and in the long run. And there's going to be a lot of people who will always hate this show because it's Disney era or just it didn't align with them. And I think social media's amplified this problem too. It kind of exacerbated the toxicity in the fandom. You have these people who have amassed these followings who now just subscribe to this one belief of what Star Wars should be. And they hate anything new, no matter the quality of the content or the stories.
I totally agree. And you make a lot of great points. I, however, am the only fully correct Star Wars fan. Everything I say is just the truth.
Yep.
But no, you make a great point too, because I think appeasing all fans is a fool's errand, and I think that's why the best media to come out of Star Wars, and even some misses, like I have my problems with the prequels, but it's like I don't think George was trying to appease any fans with the prequels. He was just telling the story he wanted to tell, and if for better or worse, I think a lot of the best Star Wars media is just doing that. Like, I don't think Andor was conceived because they wanted to hit like a certain demographic necessarily. Like, maybe, but that felt like it was those people's vision for a story that they wanted to tell. And like, in terms of knowing things about the lore and being really knowledgeable, the showrunner of this series, Leslie Headland, she knows her shit. Like, she can pull from very obscure points and corners of the lore to make this show, and she demonstrated that she knows her stuff. Rian Johnson was the same. People shit on him for like the force projection Luke, saying like that wasn't out of the lore or whatever, and then he posted a picture of like some old ass lore Star Wars book and then opened it to the page where that power was on. It's like the people that are most shit on by the fans seem to know a lot more about the franchise than those same fans do, which I think it's just a little interesting. But
totally agree.
yeah, just and this is just a funny joke about the show in general, transitioning away from the fandom now finally. But
Yes.
I thought because all of the main characters we follow in the Acolyte are like mid-level Jedi, I would say. Like they have their own little sub-council, and it's just like the Acolyte. It is in essence a show about how the executive team at the company just really has no idea what middle management does. They just aren't in the loop on what's going on within their own organization.
For real. Yeah, they're just totally oblivious to what's going on at the lower levels.
Yeah. But let's talk about, I think, one of the best elements of the show, just hands down, and that would be the action scenes. Some really great stuff here. I would say the fight scene with Kimir halfway through the show is the real standout. It just felt vicious in a way that a lot of Star Wars fights usually aren't, for a variety of different reasons. But I love how Kimir is able to take on so many Jedi at once, but he's also shown to clearly be struggling, right? Like, it keeps... I don't know if I'm saying this right, but like when he's first introduced, like he floats down and he has the mask on, and he is very, very larger than life and like alien in that moment. But as the fight goes on, he is kept from feeling like this supernatural threat because like he's having a hard time because he's fighting like 11 different people on his own, and he wins, but he's like all cut up and sweaty, and you know. I just think it's really cool. I think it's a really well done fight with some great choreography.
I agree. Yeah, I think that the episodes 5, the fight sequence there, is the best part of the show, or one of the best parts of the show. It's just, in that real environment, it feels complex. There's lots of moving pieces, and just when he pulls out that second shorter blade out of the main blade, and he's got these two blades that he's fighting with, I thought that was just so cool. And the way he's like, yeah, I agree. How he glides down at the end of episode 4. Oh, it's just bone chilling. It's such a cool, and the perspective is great too. Of just, you don't really see him.
He's like blurry in the background.
Exactly, he's out of focus. So it's like it's great. I just feel like that cliffhanger ending is just like, God damn, come on, just push through and show me what happens next. Yeah,
we're gonna talk about it in a second. But I also think the climactic fight sequences, especially the one between Kimir and Sol, was really great. That's another one of those that has the crouching tiger, hidden dragon like movement when Sol kind of like softly floats down backwards onto the ground. Really great stuff, and I love how the fights in this show are not just with lightsabers. The characters are utilizing martial arts alongside their weapons, so you get this really nice touch of them using both sword fighting and hand-to-hand combat really well. And another great example of this is the fight with Carrie-Anne Moss's character and May at the beginning of the show. Really fun fight, and I also like the element that she is supposed to kill a Jedi without a weapon. Like, get them to attack her, and then if she can, like, I guess, disarm them with their own lightsaber, she can use that or something. I think that made for some fun, interesting fights. And she had to bait the Jedi because they're not supposed to attack an unarmed person, obviously. But it was cool. I like that stuff.
Yeah, I liked all of that, and I agree too. Like, I think this show, because we talked about it before too, in previous episodes, that there's like a line. I can't remember exactly what it is, but like a Jedi's lightsaber is just that. It's just a tool. It doesn't define who you are, and it's not your only means of attack. But then we see time and time again in this show, The Acolyte, the Jedi they just whip out their lightsabers willy-nilly, especially that Yord guy. But they just they'll pull him out whenever, and they're just so
especially Sol in the flashback.
Yeah, they're just so dependent on them. But then you see how Kimir in that fight scene too, he just easily disarms some of their lightsabers, just makes them incapacitated, and the Jedi are I have no idea what to do. Because I just know that I need to keep using my lightsaber. But yeah, you're right that when they're thinking outside the box and they're using their powers, or they're just doing these hand-to-hand kind of combat sequences, those are, I think, infinitely better than just standard lightsaber v lightsaber.
Yeah, and in this fight, the middle of the season fight with Kimir, I think there's a great moment with Daphne Keene's character, Jecki, the little apprentice girl, who's like a really good fighter. And a lot of people pointed this out online after the fight, and I think it's really true. It's like she's so confident and competent, and is like really holding her own. But then at the end, when she's stabbed, like you see just like so much sadness and fear on her face, because at the end of the day, it's like she's a little kid who was thrown in. I mean, not a little kid, but like very young and a student who was thrown probably into a situation that she should not have been in. And then now her life is being cut short, and that's very scary. And she's not in the show a ton, but like kudos to Keene for that performance in that moment. I think that was really great because it adds that level of, humanity to the Jedi, even though they try to be like detached in a lot of ways. When push comes to shove, like when the chips are really down, like the emotions come through, and I think that really worked.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that didn't really work in the show was the pacing.
It's the worst part of the show.
Yes, it really is. It's not great.
Couple of main issues that I think cause it to feel so bad. Number one, this is an 8-episode show that's about 4.5 hours long in total. And of those 8 episodes, is it 8 or is it 6? Hold on.
It's 8 episodes.
It's 8, okay. Of those 8, 2 of them, 2 entire episodes are dedicated to flashbacks. And both of them occur at pretty critical moments affecting the present day's story's momentum. The first flashback episode occurs just after Osha and May realize that the other ones are alive, and at the point where it really feels like the start of the main story's quest, in essence. It kind of feels like the story is opening up at this point, and then we get a whole episode of flashback right after that, and the second flashback occurs just after Sol says, for like the 3rd or 4th time, that he's finally going to confess and come clean as to what happened 16 years ago on this planet. And it's also the penultimate episode. It's like the same problem the Book of Boba Fett had, where one of it was episode 6 in that show, not episode 7, but like one of the last episodes of that show is like, we're just going to do an episode of The Mandalorian now and hang out with Luke Skywalker for a bit. It's like, you can't stop it. Stop doing that.
Yeah, right.
And the second issue is the cliffhanger in episode 4. Mm-hmm. It is my least favorite type of cliffhanger. I mentioned earlier how like mainstream old school TV has a lot of merits and wonderful things that are left behind in this style of storytelling. This type of cliffhanger is one thing in regular TV that I really hate because it's when Kimir shows up to fight and he does the big like mega blast and then the episode cuts to black. It reminds me of that bullshit Negan cliffhanger from The Walking Dead where we don't figure out who he hits with the bat. And the reason I don't like this style of cliffhanger is it is not a cliffhanger built on dramatic tension or character dynamics at all. It functionally is just cutting a scene in half. So the cliffhanger is like, I want to see how the scene ends, but I think it's dramatically cheap and it feels manipulative. On like network TV, I get it. It's like, oh, tune in next week, see what happens. But it's just cheap. And I think episodes 4 and 5 would have functioned much better if they were just one episode put together. Because I don't really see why they couldn't be. And that leads into the next issue, which I wonder how you feel about this. The main characters just should not have gone back to Coruscant in episode 4 after their like initial little outing. It feels like a break in the adventure, and the screen time could have been better spent on our 4 main characters here bonding, leading up to half of them getting killed later in the episode. And like there's some of that, but the Coruscant shit just felt like a detour to pick up some red shirts to die on the away mission.
A little bit, yeah. Like I think that there could have been something more compelling than just going back to Coruscant and just being there. I like Coruscant. I think it's a cool planet, but yeah, I agree that you're already out on the adventure, and then you come and then you take a pause from the adventure to go back home,
Right.
and then you go back out on the adventure. It's like that's some fat you could have trimmed right there.
Yeah, it just feels it's like I don't know. It's like if Luke and Obi-Wan had gone like back to Tatooine or like back to the farm after meeting Han Solo, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Like it's
Or
like, oh, we got to pick up some stuff from the Moisture farm. Let's like pop the Millennium Falcon over there, and then we'll go to Alderaan. And like it felt like that to me.
Yeah, there could have been a more clever way to write in just getting the red shirts over there, you know.
Or just you don't even need them because like you usually have red shirts on an away mission, so it can feel like characters are dying and there are stakes without killing any of your main characters. But this episode kills 2 of our main characters. So it's like you don't even need the extra people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's true.
In my opinion,
it's still a very, very big threat. I think like the main thing for pacing with me was how they dragged out the main mystery of the show over all of these episodes. And really the main mystery is what happened the night that May and Osha left their home. And I appreciate how we get these multiple perspectives, you know, May's perspective, Osha's perspective, the witch's perspective, and then the Jedi's perspective. Like we get a lot of this. So everyone, you get to see how the truth can look different to different people, and how some people will manipulate the truth in their favor or view it subjectively to position themselves in a better light and kind of allow themselves to cope. But I think the showrunners could have cut a lot of fat out of the story and still have had the same impact. It just felt like, come on, just get to the mystery rather than like push it together.
It felt artificially extended. Like it's that cliche where like he's like, I'm gonna tell you right now, and then something happens that keeps him from saying it, or like and it just kept happening. And I do wonder with the flashbacks, I wonder if there would have been a way to, instead of having 2 full episodes be flashbacks, just split them up and have them happen throughout at specific points. I don't know. Like you could even have the same amount of story happen in the flashbacks, but just in smaller chunks over the course of the season. It just feels, I don't know, because they always feel like detours when you get like a full episode of something entirely different when your story is like building up its momentum. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you're jumping around in time periods, it's not too great. But yeah, I think it could have been a little better if they're having like a character moment, like Soul and May or something like that, and then it flashes back to what happened that night really quickly, and then it goes back to present day. I think that could have worked a little better than having full episodes detouring us away.
Just a couple little miscellaneous things that I liked. I like the little. It's just like when you see the Jedi Temple from the outside in this show, the bottom part of it is just like a little bit more visible than it is in the prequels because like the surrounding buildings and stuff haven't been built up as high. It's cute. It indicates the passage of time in between the 2 things. I also like the High Republic Jedi robes and how the Jedi dress slightly differently on different planets. I thought that was pretty cool.
I love all the Jedi aesthetics, and like I said earlier, the set design on some of these ships is really cool. Like the whole one of the sequences that I did really enjoy was kind of the prisoner escape sequence with it was Osha, I think.
It was Osha. Yeah, I forgot about that actually.
I know you kind of forget about it, but like just that little ragtag band of prisoners getting together to like escape. I thought that was fun and that was unique. And these kind of various characters, it's like I want more of them. Give me more of them. They're cool little characters. And I really like Carrie Ann Moss as she's just such a great Jedi. She's so stoic. She brings that Trinity presence from the Matrix. And I think that she's just a really, really effective Jedi character and just a great actor. And I knew it was coming, even though I didn't really tag it from, a million miles away. But if there was one character that I expected to show up in the show, it would be Yoda, and I'm so glad that he was not a main character here. I'm fine with the reveal. It felt very tasteful. Him at the end, just for like, you just see his ears, and that's it. And it's just kind of the old puppet, and I thought that was great, and I don't want any more of him in the second season. He should just maybe be there for 2 lines, and that's it.
Okay.
I don't want any more of him, because I think that would be too much, because this isn't a story about him. It's about the Jedi as a whole and the corruption there.
Yes. And I like, speaking about the corruption, I guess let's go back to Kimir, the stranger, as he's called earlier in the show. I really like the reveal that he's the guy behind the mask. It is a little bit telegraphed, but I think it still works and was satisfying. And it kind of, it kind of plays on the Darth Jar Jar theory that people loved from a while back, where it's like, because and he's doing the thing that Yoda does in Empire, which was the like impetus for the Darth Jar Jar theory. It was like he's like a silly little goofy guy to the outside, but secretly he's the man pulling the strings and has the mask and everything like that. I think he's definitely one of the most interesting characters in the show, and I really enjoyed how it takes the time to develop him as a character with seemingly pretty decent reasons to not like the Jedi, right? But
yeah, I liked his introduction too, because it feels kind of like you were just saying, hiding in the shadows, kind of almost Palpatine and Anakin to a certain extent. Like, we can see it coming from a mile away that Palpatine is the Sith Lord, but Anakin and all the Jedi are just totally oblivious, and he's just in the shadows there, just a character in the story, and you don't, all of a sudden he takes a right turn, and you're like, oh, now he reveals his true power, which I think was great. But yeah, Kimir, he's so fucking cool. I love him. He's intimidating and deadly, and he also brings kind of this charming, mysterious, handsome character to life very well. He's a little dreamy. He's very handsome. I like him.
Yeah, but someone on sort of that note, like someone online pointed out how the show really contrasts him and Master Soul in the back half of the show, where Kimir has taken Osha back to his planet, and Soul eventually figures out that it's May on his ship, and he. The way the two of them handle that situation is Kimir sort of allows Osha to set the pace and ask questions and want to learn answers, whereas Soul very literally restrains May and is like, I'm going to tell you what happened. And it just really... It's very interesting to watch the two of them, especially since one is our good guy, our hero mentor, and he's very controlling about it, whereas Kimir really, I mean, like, you can argue he's manipulating her, and maybe he is to an extent, but I don't think he's really fucking lying. I think I enjoyed what he said about, like, all of your friends in the Jedi Order that he killed, let's not forget, but, like, they can only ever love you to a point. Like, they have a code. They have this, like, line of ethics that keeps them from truly emotionally committing to people. And, like, it seemed like Jecki and Yord were growing to care about Osha, and Soul does in his own kind of fucked up way as well. But, like, so is Kimir correct here? Maybe not, but coming from him, like, that conclusion feels totally reasonable, and I don't think he's trying to be dishonest. And he's also definitely Vernestra's former apprentice. Like, he has whip scars on his back. Her lightsaber is a whip saber. And she's, like, clearly covering some stuff from her past up too, which will tie into Master Soul's arc later on. But yeah, I just think he's a very interesting character, an interesting antagonist. One thing that I don't feel was necessary was Darth Plagueis in a cave. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that was on the nose. I didn't really like that a ton.
I don't know why he's here, Like,
yeah, I mean, I always assumed that Kimir was like the apprentice rather than the master. Like, I did not ever think that he was the master in this story. So I liked that they kind of revealed it, but at the same time, like, really, Plagueis?
Yeah, it's just like I feel like him being here doesn't add anything to the story for me. But you know how I feel about Plagueis, right? I've said this on Rewind. I haven't said it on the actual podcast. But I know my theory is wrong, now at least. But I maintain that when George Lucas originally conceived the idea of Darth Plagueis for that scene in Revenge of the Sith, that Plagueis was just a guy that Palpatine made up. He was not a real person. He was a story about a guy who conveniently learned how to do the thing that Anakin wanted to do, and that was his function. And I wish that the people who control the canon of this universe went that direction instead, because I think it's more interesting. I don't
know. Well, and it would give more freedom in this situation too, of like, we don't need to necessarily have someone in there that people know. And I like the idea that Plagueis is also just a lie, because he was just trying to manipulate Anakin.
I know, it works better.
Why does Plagueis need to be a real person at all? Especially when he's like, "Did you hear the tale of?" It's a tale. It's not a truth necessarily. Yeah. It's a story, and he's just trying to manipulate Anakin here. So why wouldn't he just lie about anything?
Yeah. Well, and then when Anakin like comes to him later, it's like, "Please help me save Padme's life." Palpatine's like, "Oh, right. Well, only one guy has ever managed to do that. But if we work together, we'll figure it out." And it's like, based on the implication of your story, Plagueis told you how to do this, man.
Yeah. You should already know how to do this, and now you're telling me you don't.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and it's like the whole point is that, like, I don't even think there was a tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise. I think Palpatine is like, okay, I need this guy to be motivated to go evil for a little bit until he goes too far. So I'm going to start pushing some dreams about his wife dying into his head. And then when he comes to the theater, I'm just going to drop this little nugget, and I'm just going to see what he does. That's my interpretation of it. I think it's cool.
Yeah, I like that. So, I mean, we'll see where the Darth Plagueis goes, but I feel like we might get a young Palpatine at some point, and I don't know how I would feel about that.
Yeah, that would be kind of weird. But I also wonder, I don't know how many non-Star Wars nerds are watching The Acolyte, in fairness, but if you did not know who Darth Plagueis was and what he looks like, what would your response be to this scene? It's like there's a scene between two of our major characters for the season, and then we cut away to a cave, and there's just like this little monster there who doesn't come up again in the rest of the show. Like, if the show was announced as a multi-season show, it'd be like, oh, it's a tease for season 2 or something. But this was apparently conceived to be a mini-series, which we'll talk about later on, because I don't know if that works. But like, I can just imagine like imagine your dad or something watching this and being like, what was that about?
Yeah, right. That's exactly what my dad would say if he watches. He'd be like, "What? Who is that character? I don't get it." And then he just wouldn't care.
Yeah. But we should probably talk about our two main characters, May and Osha. The twin sisters, or maybe not sisters. We'll get to it. I liked Osha fine as a protagonist. I never really clicked with May. Especially in episodes 4 and 5, I found her motivation very confusing. So she finds out that Osha's alive in episode 2. So she betrays Khmer and the stranger because she says, actually, Osha being alive changes everything. I'm going to turn myself into the Jedi. And she runs to the Wookiee guy's hut. Khmer has beat her there and killed the Jedi. You know, whatever. I'm fine with that. Don't care. That's okay. But then after the battle, she and Osha run into each other, And she yells at Osha, like, the Jedi ruined our lives. What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And then knocks her out and then cuts her hair to infiltrate the Jedi and take her place. So, like, did I miss something in between? Or what was she lying to Khmer about turning herself into the Jedi? Did she panic when the Jedi started losing? I don't understand. Did I miss a beat or something?
Yeah, I was confused by that too. It feels like her plan is constantly changing, where it's like, I'm going to go with Khmer, and then she gets there and she's like, well, Osha's alive. I'm actually not going to do this. And then now she's all of a sudden wants revenge and against Soul, and it is not handled very well. And I think overall I like the arc of Osha and May kind of swapping places in a way. Which one of them starts out kind of more good, one starts out more dark, and they kind of just alternate. The good person turns to the dark, and I do like them basically trading places and being guided by their emotions, but I don't think that these characters were written very well, and I think the performance of each character could have been better too. I think a lot of the characters here, they do feel stiff and wooden, like the prequels, which I think is a little intentional given the general tone of those films. So I think most of that works. At the same time, I would appreciate some more acting, and I think that Osha and May, the performance just wasn't there for me. I think it could have been a little bit better, and I think even the kid actors weren't amazing. They were fine.
I always try not to be too hard on kid actors, though. They were like, what, 8? Or
I know,
I
me
guess
too. I'm like,
it's probably one person.
Exactly.
I do think, I didn't love the performance either. I do think Stenberg, who's non-binary, by the way, if we're referencing them in the episode, I do think they were much better as Osha than as May. I never bought anything with May. I don't know why, but I just really did not like that character.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about this a lot because I like Osha's arc a lot. I think the idea of a good person going to the dark side and still being a mostly good person by the end of the show. Like, Osha kills Soul, which is bad. We don't like murder, but it's a pretty reasonable sense of betrayal. He did kill her mother and lie to her entire life, blaming it on her child twin.
Yeah, that would make me mad.
Like, the idea of a almost justified turn to the dark side is really cool.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the story works without May, but I wish it did. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of agree there. And it gets kind of confusing too. Like, I'm fine with them both being created out of this Virgins of the Force. That's fine. I'm totally on board with that, and I think it's great. I think the reveal that they're the same person or two halves of one person, it was semi-stupid to me. And I don't know how to further elaborate on that.
Yeah, I also don't think it really brings anything to the table regarding their relationship. Like, how, for them, is this any different than them being sisters?
Yeah.
And is it supposed to be like, it's kind of like that fucking Force dyad thing that the Rise of Skywalker introduces between Rey and Kylo Ren. It's like, can't they just like be people who have a fucking human relationship with each other because of the experiences that they shared? Like, I don't think we need to come up with all this weird bullshit to define why people are connected to each other. I think especially in the sequel trilogy, right? Like we see why Rey and Ben Solo feel the way they do about each other over the course of the first 2 movies. You don't need to invent a weird thing that's also never explained. We'll talk about it in the rewind next year.
Yeah.
I don't like it either. I don't get it. I don't like it. It's like, just make them fucking sisters. With the coven too and all that, it just kind of ties in. So there's the ascension ceremony, and we're never really told specifically what they are ascending to. Them being halves of a whole makes it seem like if they both did it, it would be a more transformative process or something. And I think it's okay that we're never explained, because every character who would know what the ceremony does is dead. So I think that's actually okay that we never get to know. But it's kind of frustrating too.
It is, yeah. I don't really understand the purpose of it either, but hey, maybe one day they'll explain it a little more. Mm-hmm. We'll see. Maybe some more of those witches somewhere else know more about it.
And I do think it's intentional, though, that we don't know.
Yes.
Because I think that plays into the perspective element of it all. It's like Soul causes all this by trying to, and we're transitioning into Master Soul talk now.
Yes.
But before fully that, it's like he kills their mother because he sees her transform into like a black cloud, and then little May starts turning into a black cloud as well. And from his perspective, right, he's like, I'm guessing he thought she was going to kill the kid with some black magic or something. And so he stabs her and kills her. And she probably wasn't going to do that. It seems like she was, kind of chill for the most part. But Master Soul is the best part of the show, I think.
He's pretty good. I like him a lot.
Yeah, Lee Jung-jae learned English to take on this role, so huge respect to him for that. He also took a lot of cues from Liam Neeson's work as Qui-Gon, and I think that shines through. There is sort of a, and Qui-Gon, actually, a great parallel to Qui-Gon is Qui-Gon, probably ultimately a better guy who makes less violent decisions in his tenure, but a man guided by noble intentions, trying to do the right thing, who ends up creating a disciple of darkness. So, good parallel there.
That's
that
true.
Works.
That's very good observation.
But yeah, just really interesting and tragic character. As like, even to the last second, he thinks he was doing the right thing, which
Well, yeah, he's complex, and you can understand his reasoning and his perspective. I think that they do a good job of that.
Yeah.
But they also show how he's overreaching in his authority, especially when he's younger, and like how that he's like leaning into the fallacy of the Jedi, where they think that they know how the Force should be wielded, that they should have kind of dominion of it in a certain way. He's kind of this perfect embodiment of the Jedi Order because they act so nobly. They view themselves as the guardians of peace and justice throughout the galaxy.
Yeah.
Yet they're kind of ignorant of their actions or the consequences of their actions, like what happens next after. And they kind of act in this authoritarian fashion where it's, if you aren't practicing the Force like us, then you're a danger, and we need to do something about that, which is kind of how they treat all these witches.
Yeah, he and the Jedi overall are very paternalistic. And, I was thinking, it's not it's not even a really close comparison, really, but, and Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame predate us doing this podcast, so we never really talked about them, but Thanos, if you remember, so there's like a seeming contradiction at a certain point, because Thanos says that every time he like goes and wipes out half of the population of a planet, like they become paradises and whatever. But in Guardians of the Galaxy, you see, I think it's on like Gamora's little readout, that she's like the sole survivor of her species or something like that.
Yeah.
So it makes me, you talking about how like the Jedi come in and don't really think about the consequences of their actions, it kind of reminded me of Thanos in his like conquest. It's like, well, you say all these places are paradises, but did you ever go back and check? Did you ever go and look at what the consequences of what you just did are? Like, how many broken families are there because the Jedi come in and like take the little babies away? You know,
Yeah.
What happens to those people after their infant is taken away to learn about all this stuff?
Right.
There's a level of arrogance, especially to Soul in this, because he doesn't even find it in himself to apologize to Osha for killing her mom and lying about it and pinning it on her twin for 16 years. Like,
yes.
Like,
oh my god.
And I think what is Carrie-Anne Moss's character's name? I forget. Indara.
Indara.
Yeah. I enjoyed that flashback scene with her too, though, where she's like, "You did this. Your intentions were good. You have caused harm. Think about why you did it, and if you feel you were right, commit." It's not good advice, but you understand why she's saying that, and also why Soul would believe it, because, like, yeah, you're going to put more trauma on this little child. Like, her entire family is, like, obliterated, and it is kind of your fault. But it happened, and you could, in theory, give her a good life. So it's a very morally dubious decision, but it's an understandable one at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, I also, speaking of the Jedi, we also have some other Jedi in here, Yord and Jekki, too, which we've already kind of touched on a little bit, but I enjoyed them overall on the show. I thought they were nice additions, and nice to just see some other types of Jedi that aren't just like Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan. Type of folks.
Yeah, they're like lower level Jedi. They're still apprentices, except Yord, I guess, is a master or a knight or something.
He's a knight, yeah.
He's a knight, yeah. And I like that. We don't see a lot of knights in the movies, so that was kind of cool. And I like that he and Osha knew each other as like little younglings or whatever. And he's kind of cold to her, but you can tell that there's a friendship and a kinship there from years of like growing up together. And I liked her relationship with Jekki as well. Daphne Keene, I think, said that she was playing the role like someone who kind of had a crush on Osha, which is cute and makes it really sad when both she and Yord get killed. I actually cared about Osha's relationships with these two people more than I did for the relationship between her and her sister, which I think is actually a pretty big problem.
A little bit.
But I was caught off guard when they both got killed. I was not expecting it, and I actually found it a little bit off-putting for a while when it happened. I was like, oh, that made me feel really bad.
And I thought it was pretty powerful.
It was pretty powerful, and it was kind of gruesome. Like, Yord's head gets snapped.
She gets stabbed 3 times in the chest. Like, oh man, that was quick. Wow. Fuck.
Yeah, and it like lingers on both of their deaths, and it's like, yeah, because these were, like we talked about earlier with Jekki, it's like these were people who were not equipped for this situation, which kind of plays into the prequels as well, because the Jedi are not used to fighting equal combatants. It's like when in The Boys, whenever Homelander has to fight like an actually powerful being, he's like, "What the fuck? I was not ready for that."
Yeah, he's just like, "Oh god, I can't handle this today."
Yeah. But yeah, and one other thing I really liked, and this is an element that I think could have played into making the show a real full season of television, is the investigation into the Jedi by that senator.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really intriguing element of world building and added to the story, and it doesn't really pop up until like the last episode. It's something that I would have enjoyed to see as kind of a C plot running throughout the season. It would have given us some time on Coruscant without our main characters having to go back there, and it would have developed this like Vernestra character, the Green Lady, as a character, and her rivalry with this senator, maybe. Because I like, and just tying Vernestra back to Soul really quick before carrying on, but like, it's very tragic that Vernestra is clearly covering up for whatever happened with Kimir, right? And then Sol was covering up what happened on Osha and May's planet, and then Vernestra makes the very police department like decision to pin the systemic failures over the last decades of this institution on one guy.
Yep.
And so none of the problems that caused this are going to be addressed. She's using a cover-up to cover up her own cover-up.
Yeah.
And I fucking knew it. From the moment she was on screen, I'm like, I don't trust this lady. She's fucking shady. I don't know why I know this, but I know it. And she was. I was right.
Find a way.
Yeah. But the idea of the golden era of the Jedi coming to an end with like some distrust forming for the institution within the Senate, it sounds worth exploring. It gives Vernestra something to do, which she doesn't really have for the most part. And it would also have been an interesting contrast to the prequels, because the Jedi in the prequels hold a pretty large amount of unquestioned institutional power within the Republic. Like, there was distrust now, but not then. That's very interesting what happened in between.
Yeah.
Who died?
That would have exactly. Yeah, what was the big change? I agree that this could have been, there's so much potential in this concept, because I agree that it's very neat. I really like his line, like the senator's line, where he just calls out the Jedi Order. He just says, I think the Jedi are a massive system of unchecked power posing as a religion, a delusional cult that claims to control the uncontrollable. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And this kind of distrust in institutions is important to explore, especially considering distrust today in some of our government institutions as well. I think it could have been interesting to explore that, and it's just very neat to see someone questioning the Jedi for what they are, which is just this bunch of religious fanatics who have so much influence. And how can you really trust that when they're not elected leaders or someone, adjacent to that? They're just these clerics, these priests, basically, who we've just given a lot of power to, and they've got lightsabers, man. They're dangerous.
Well, and they're like, but the thing is though, like, they do have good intentions and they're trying to do the right thing. They are at their heart noble, but as I just looked up her name because I'd forgotten it, Mother Anastasia, the leader of the Coven, says to Sol in that flashback, like, you all have good intentions, and someday those noble intentions you all have will destroy every Jedi in the galaxy, which is what happens.
Yep, basically.
Like, Qui-Gon has very noble intentions of freeing this slave boy and giving him a better life, but in doing so, and maybe not doing it to the best of his ability, the entire fucking thing crumbles in on itself, because it is a corrupt institution populated by well-intentioned people. That's what the Jedi Order is,
Yes, and this kind of leads us into our next point here, too, because I think it is this layered effect here. We have this compounding cover-up for a cover-up for a cover-up, and these good intentions and these noble intentions and everything. It's just going to continue to... It's a domino effect, and I think this series, it does highlight how the Jedi are fallible, and they kind of act like trigger-happy world police in a way. They're just ready to just go in guns blazing and kill someone the moment they think that they're a threat. And I think in a way, there's this quote from Twin Peaks that comes to mind because we're watching Twin Peaks. There's this character called Major Briggs, and he's got this great line in season 2. It's very secret. We don't know what he does for work. He's just kind of this classified officer. Whenever you ask what he does, he's like, that's classified. So it's very vague what he does, but he's this military guy, and he's got this great line. It says, any bureaucracy that functions in secret inevitably lends itself to corruption. And I think that's very true here with the Jedi too, because it's just this bureaucracy that continues to function without checks and balances. Inevitably something is going to go askew here. And I think that the Jedi in the Acolyte here, they also mirror somewhat of what Luke said in The Last Jedi about the Order, how they're romanticized, deified. But when, you strip away the myth, look at their deeds, the legacy is failure. It's hypocrisy. It's hubris. And I think the Acolyte does a pretty good job of highlighting that they're not all, the Jedi are not 100% good, similar to how criminals, they're not always bad people. They're not 100% evil either.
Yeah. People are victims of their circumstances.
Exactly. It's all very situational, and even though the Jedi they're well intentioned even with these cover ups. They didn't want to cause a panic or stir up things or harm the legacy of the Jedi. But these cover ups, they just inevitably lead to more problems.
And in the wise words of one Michael Scott, who do you think you are? What gives you the right to decide on these cover-ups? But no, I will make an assertion about the Jedi, both in universe and in real life. The Jedi are much better when it's just like one or two guys trying to do the right thing, because the institution always seems to fucking crumble, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's a bureaucracy. It's a religious bureaucracy rather than someone following like spiritual guidance on their own and following a sense of morals. But I think it's very much like we're seeing how the golden age of the Jedi is ending and the sort of rot forming at the core of the Order, which will envelop the entire thing by the time of the prequels, right? Like it's just this cold, lifeless institution that chooses not to go free a slave woman who is the mother of one of their students for 9 years, I guess, is in between episodes 1 and 2, whatever. But it's very much like a path to hell is paved with good intentions theme throughout the show, with Indara, Sol, especially Sol, and maybe Vernestra too. I don't know. We don't know enough about her character. I don't know what her whole fucking deal is. But something happened between her and Kimir, and I do like that scene at the end where like he feels her presence and it's like, oh fuck, puts the helmet on right away.
I like
it's like a Magneto helmet for the Force.
Well, I did like that concept, how it was just like it just blocked out all your senses and it's just you and the Force, and it's like it just harkens back to, Luke without the vision, just trying to defend the blaster bolts from that orbiting ball around him, like just connecting with the Force and letting it flow through you and just trusting it to help you survive. I thought that was a very neat little detail.
Yes, I thought that was great, and I also like how it disrupts the lightsaber crystals. It added a really neat wrinkle to that fight with him. And just we've touched on it already, but like one thing I find really interesting here is how the entire incident is pinned on Sol, which is, he's like labeled as the bad apple when it's clear that Vernestra has her own cover-up going on, and it's like it prevents... and it makes me wonder if we get a season 2, like, what is she confessing to Yoda? Is she repeating the lie she told to the Senate, or is she coming clean? Because I bet she's repeating the lie she told to the Senate, which means, like, this situation is a problem that could be solved. But it's not going to be solved because this lady is covering her own ass. And I think that's sort of the thing here. It's like she is the shadier of the two, I would say. Like instead of examining the systemic failures of the thing she works for, she's just like, well, this is resolved. I liked Sol, but we got to pin it on somebody. It'll get the Senate off our backs. So, there we go.
Well, thinking about looking ahead, what do you want to see in season 2? Anything in particular, if there is a season 2? I suppose.
I would like to see more of the relationship between the Jedi and the Senate. I would like to see Osha and Kamir's. I want to see Sith training. What does that look like?
Yes.
We've never
I would like
seen
to see
that
that
before in the mainstream branch of the media, at least. I want to know what that looks like because I don't think either of these people is like cackling villain. I think they are understandably grievanced, and I want to see how the Sith ideology is explained and taught to someone who is not a bad person.
Yeah. I like that idea. I think I want to continue seeing more of Osha and Kamir, and they kept hinting at it this season, but I think that they'll have some kind of romance between the two of them, which would be cool.
I think that would be cool as well.
Screen, because it's kind of more of a master and apprentice situation, and if you throw in a little bit of like romance in there too, how does that complicate that dynamic between the two of them?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Star Wars has shied away from the romance stuff for a little while, and they need to stop doing that. So, yeah, that would be cool. And also, like, she was definitely checking out his dick in that one episode, so there's some attraction there.
Hell yeah. Go for it, Osha.
Good for her. But, yeah, you know what I don't want to see? Palpatine or Darth Plagueis. Fuck off. Let this be its own thing. I don't need it to tie explicitly into the characters of the prequels. I want to see these two doing their own shit and being their own masters. Any final thoughts?
Palpatine. Yeah.
No. Any final thoughts on the Acolyte?
At all. No. I think we talked about it enough. Mostly positive. Could have been a lot better, I would say. Still.
Well, let's talk about some other stuff then. Stuff we've been watching, reading, playing, whatever. In the interim, Niles, what have you been up to the last couple weeks?
So a few things. Rewatched some good old movies like Monsters, Inc. and Borat lately. They hold up for the most part. Monsters, Inc. I think holds up a lot better than Borat. But when we were watching Borat, I was just kind of had this like realization. Just Sacha Baron Cohen was Eric Andre before Eric Andre was Eric Andre. Like he's doing this kind of like real world prank stuff. It was very funny. Like but it's I don't know. It's just a small thing, but yeah, Borat still kind of funny at parts. I also watched Mamma Mia for the first time just last night. So fun. Such a fun movie. It's just this campy love story with just ABBA. So much ABBA. I love it.
Okay.
I'm definitely going to watch that movie again down the line. Mamma Mia's such a fun time. Also started House of the Dragon Season 2, which will be our next episode, which we'll talk about. So looking forward to discussing all that drama. Continuing on with Twin Peaks. As well. It's a fun rewatch, and I can't remember if I mentioned it in the last episode or not, but I watched Poor Things as well.
I think you did, yeah.
Yeah, I might have. I think I did. But yeah, Poor Things, still a fun time. I think I liked Kinds of Kindness just a little bit better.
Okay.
But still both really cool movies. And we went back and started watching the first season of RuPaul's Drag Race, and boy, is it different than it is today. The first season came out in 2009, so a lot of time has passed since then, and you can see how the first season it's very low budget. Very, they really want it. It's feels very similar to like Project Runway or like those kinds of like very 2000-esque reality TV shows where they're focusing a lot on the drama and less on,
that's
like,
interesting.
Like they're really hyping that side of it up and less focusing on like the drag queen's personal story or like the improv. It's about fashion and drama. That's what season 1 is. It's very different. But a lot of the stuff still is very consistent with the later seasons. So I'm going to continue on with that. It is honestly funny and very entertaining. So I would recommend checking out the first season. But what about you, Don? What have you been up to lately?
Continuing on, powering through the Cryptonomicon, approaching the very end. I think I'm within the last 100 or so pages now.
Nice.
So excited to finish it up, see how it ends, and then move on to something else. I've been reading this book for a very long time. So
yeah.
I also went to see M. Night Shyamalan's Trap, which I thought was a great time at the movies. Fun premise. Very creative, and just really good tension, you know? I'd recommend people go check it out. I thought it was really fun.
I want to see that one.
Yeah. And then also been watching Batman Caped Crusader, the new Batman animated series. It's on Amazon for some reason. And it's solid. I like it. It's like just a sort of run-of-the-mill Batman series, but it's actually like set in the 1940s. Which is kind of a fun little wrinkle. And I wish it leaned more into the like noir aesthetic a little bit. The opening credits does. It's like sort of black and white, off sepia a little bit with lots of film grain. But then the rest of the show just looks like your standard 2D animation Batman show. But there are fun wrinkles in it, like Harleen Quinzel is Bruce Wayne's therapist at one point, which is fun.
Okay.
And then it's neat. I don't love it, but I enjoy it enough. So
that's cool.
But not a ton from me this time. But so yeah, that's it.
All right.
That's gonna be the show, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening and tuning in this week. We really appreciate it. If you like the show, hope you leave us a 5-star review and share it with your friends and family and whoever else you think might like this kind of podcast.
Please do. And we'll be back maybe next week, maybe 2 weeks from now to talk about House of the Dragon. We will see. It kind of depends on some things. But we'll talk about that. We'll probably do an Alien Covenant, or not Covenant, that movie happened already. Alien Romulus review at some point in the near future as well. And then who knows for the rest of the year. It could be anything. But
could be anything.
Yeah. Until next time, Niles, where can people find you online?
You can follow me on Instagram at NilesGotNoStyles. Dylan, what about you? Where can people follow you online?
On Instagram at DylanD1026, on Twitter at D-Day Movies, on YouTube at D-Day Movies. You can find both of us here at Play, Pause, Rewind, both on YouTube and on your podcast platform of choice. We're also over on our second channel where the aforementioned Rewind videos live. That channel is called Play, Pause, Rewind Videos. We also have a TikTok that I update every now and then called Play, Pause, Rewind _podcast. And I think that's it. So thank you all so much for watching or listening. See you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.